Welcome back to another week of SoCal Business and Basketball Report. This is Ray Dietz. Today we're about 50 miles northwest of downtown Los Angeles in Camarillo, California, where we had an exciting game tonight with Camarillo playing against Damien High School from Laverne. Earlier this year, Camarillo did win the game when they played Damien in an overtime game, and tonight Damien got back at them here at Camarillo. When people in Southern California think of Camarillo, they usually think about the outlets, the shopping up here, and also I think about the Howling Greenhouse Nurseries up here. A Canadian company initially that has some of the most advanced greenhouses in the world. My family dropped me off at the game and got to go do some shopping. Well, I enjoyed the game. But starting with the business surroundings here, there's some corporate offices. Harbor Freight Tools, the corporate headquarters, are right nearby in Oxnard. The Dallas Cowboys for years have had their training camp in Oxnard. And a couple hours north of here in Lompoc, California, it was known for years as an area that grew a lot of flowers, and the florist industry was very familiar with Lompoc, as well as North County and San Diego. The game tonight, Damien just really rolled Camarillo here. They beat him by about 30 points, and Jaime Jaquez highlights the Camarillo team. He's a senior who's committed to UCLA, and I think he's going to have a great fan base moving forward of Hispanic background. And they've done very well here. Don't have as good of a team here normally, but they have done very well in the last couple of years with him. Malik Thomas, I mentioned him last year as my favorite freshman in Southern California playing for Damien. He had over 20 points last year in a game against Etiwanda and their intense defense. And he played very well this evening. He has offers from Washington and Pepperdine at this point. Speaking of Etiwanda, I ran into Monty Herrick this past week, and his father is Jim Herrick, the old UCLA coach, and Jim is now an assistant at Cal State Northridge. So I asked Monty about Elijah Harkless, who was one of my all-go-to-war players last year, a real dog that played at Etiwanda, and he could guard 1 through 5 last year. They'd even put him on the center a couple times in games. But Monty tells me he's actually started a few games at Northridge. They've got him playing the point up there, and he's doing very well. So it was good to hear that. In terms of the Howling Greenhouse here, it's originally a Canadian company that started in the flower business, but they moved to tomatoes and cucumbers, and they had about 8 months of sunlight up there in Canada. So they got to the point where they decided to buy some land here in California. And as you're coming up the 101 from Los Angeles, you hit Ventura County a little before this, but as you're coming down the hill into Camarillo, it's like you hit an oasis. The land opens up, you can see the fields. It's not too far from the ocean as well, so that's good for the crops. But it's a prime area for agriculture. One town up north of us is Oxnard, where strawberries are king. I called my mom years ago and asked her to look at the crate of strawberries in her fridge to see if they were from Oxnard, and they were. The Dallas Cowboys had their training camp in Oxnard for years, so there's a lot of activity in the area. But these greenhouses are something else. Here in Camarillo, they have about 125 acres under glass greenhouse, and that's an equivalent of 3,000 acres on the ground. And it's because they run these vines, these tomatoes, straight up and down into the rafters, and they harvest them from ladders instead of stooping over in the field. They have 12 months of sunlight here, so it just gives them more crops, and they can harvest these tomatoes in the morning, have them shipped in the evening, and they're on the shelf in the store within 48 hours. They have all the technology. They have solar power, and they're actually sending power back to the grid here. They have the drip irrigation, and they even have a 4-acre pond area where they collect rainwater and runoff. So it's a very advanced system here, and serves the area well. And I think one day we'll see this whole coast kind of coated with these greenhouses, because of course you have to finance these things, and not everyone has been able to finance them to this point. Also in the area, I mentioned Oxnard with the strawberries. Underwood Farms is about 10 to 15 miles back toward LA. They grow all the chilies for the Sriracha sauce company. Sriracha sauce, their corporate headquarters are in Irwindale, just east of LA, and we covered that area last year during the season in that company. I mentioned Jaime Jaquez, who has a promising future, good shooter. He's got a little bit of athleticism as well, and UCLA is bringing in a couple of shooters next year. The last great Mexican-American basketball player that I can recall was Eduardo Nájera, who played high school basketball in Texas, played at Oklahoma, and as he was heading out of college, I spoke with his college coach, Kelvin Sampson, who's now the head coach at the University of Houston, and he told me that the people around Nájera were going to promote to the Mexican-American group, and hope that it would give an individual that people could identify with in the Hispanic community. And he did have a career of over 10 years in the NBA, so he did well. As we've seen the population shift here in Southern California, I think a great example is Artesia High School, who has a proud basketball tradition. Years ago, Jason Capono from UCLA played at Artesia High School, and the O'Bannon brothers also played at Artesia. The last great player I remember is James Harden, who played at Artesia and then at Arizona State, and we all know from the NBA today. But what's happened through time, the student population today at Artesia is 60% Hispanic. And so traditionally in the Hispanic population, soccer is a bigger deal than basketball. So I just wanted to bring that up tonight, as Jaime could do quite a bit for basketball in the Hispanic population as well as he moves forward. The game tonight, it was Damien 104 and Camarillo 72. So Damien actually rolled them. Right now, I would say that Damien, it'd be a close game. They might not beat Westchester or Fairfax, but at the end of the year, that could be a different ball game. I think Damien, if they continue to progress, and bear in mind they did lose to Camarillo earlier in the year in overtime, but with Malik, they have another freshman, R.J. Smith, not to be confused with J.R. Smith, but he's a promising player. He can hit the three. And they have a transfer in, a senior, Hyder, who is a good shooting guard who's committed to Fresno State. So they have the shooters, and if they continue on, they could do very well. They even have a guy off the bench by the name of Johnson, a sophomore, that gives them a nice punch off the bench. So expect them to continue to improve through the year. I would say next year might be the year that they make a deep run to the state, but I wouldn't be surprised if they did quite a bit this year as well, if they continue to improve. We were at Westchester last week, and the city section used to be absolutely tremendous. I loved watching those games. It has dropped through the years. but it made me think about the best high school team I've ever seen here in California. And that was the early 2000 Westchester team, where you had Brandon Heath, who, you know, a lot of times I thought he wanted to score a little too much. He shot the ball a lot, but you need a guy like that. He went to San Diego State. You had Brandon Bowman, who went to Georgetown. He was a long swing athlete, swing player. A few years ago, I was in Germany. Turned on the TV in the hotel, and there was Brandon playing ball in Germany. So he's made some money and made a career of it. You had Ashante Cook, a point guard who also went to Georgetown. You had Trevor Ariza, who's still playing today. Okay. You had Scott Cutley, Scott was the guy that Ed Azam, who's still the coach at Westchester, was the coach back then, but he said that Scott was the one guy he could not take off the floor. And Scott started his college career at Kent State University in my hometown in Ohio. He transferred back to Cal State Fullerton, and he today his numbers up in the rafters at Fullerton. He led the team to the NCAA's his senior year. And you also had Hassan Adams. I don't want to forget about him. He was the guy at the time that everyone thought was their best player. He played at Arizona, played in the NBA a little bit, and he was just a great guy, a tremendous human being. So that was the best team I've ever seen in California. I really enjoyed watching them play. And you know, watching Westchester last week, it brought back some memories of those great teams. And Westchester could make a run this year as well if they continue to improve. That basically does it this week. So we talked a little bit about the game tonight with Jaime, with Malik. We talked about the greenhouses, the outlets in the area. Oxnard nearby. Ventura would be the town after Oxnard, and then Santa Barbara. And then the last thing I'd mention is that up there in Lompoc, where you have that history of growing flowers, it's also where Vandenberg Air Force Base is. If there's a nuclear missile coming at the United States, the interceptor missile will come from Vandenberg, most likely, right there in Lompoc, 2 hours from here. And then the final mention is nearby in the area here is Point Mugu. And so that's a naval base near the ocean there. When Ronald Reagan passed away, they flew him back into Point Mugu and then transported him to Simi Valley to the Reagan Museum for his burial. So there's quite a bit going on in this area. It's an area you can breathe. There's agriculture. And it's always nice coming up here and spending some time. So thanks for joining us for another week. And we've got some more excitement coming up next week as well. Have a great evening.